What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and it's that time again. It's time for me to bring you a review that isn't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap, and today I'm taking a look at The Evil Within 2 by Tango Gameworks. Now, The Evil Within 2 tells the twisted and many would say tragic tale of ex-detective Sebastian's continued exploration into nightmarish fantasy lands created by evil corporations. Here now in Evil Within 2, though, we move away from the linear storytelling and move to a somewhat hub-based open world. We pick up the tale as Sebastian's descended into the darkness of the drinky drink, nursing an alien liver and living in a world where everyone thinks he's just absolutely insane. The Evil Within 2 will be out for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC today. Let's see how it did, shall we? As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Evil Within 2. That's a damn good cup of coffee, the world's scariest marshmallow peep, and Alan Wake straight up woke. Graphics are up first. And boom, just like that, color was added to a world. But it really does, especially at first, feel like the game's fictional creatures have crawled out of whatever evil digital brain space the characters have created and messed around with the color settings. But nope. And here's the thing. It actually makes sense, so stick with it. Because it's not the only thing that's changed with Evil Within 2, but sticking for a moment about things that haven't changed, one of them is the game's engine, and moving from a linear, more directed experience to the pseudo-open world or hub-based game means we don't actually see the large jump in fidelity that many times we expect to see in games with a 2 in their title. Even on the PC with the ability to get to 4K with a couple adjustments on a 1070 or 1080, you're still looking at a game that structurally is actually a bit behind the curve. Does that mean it's bad? No, but Evil Within had its own share of issues, and some of them still exist here. The strange way in which Sebastian moves, for example, like gravity just doesn't affect him, or he has a 4-foot steel rod fused to his spine. I like to envision the first option because that second one's sort of gross. Or at times what looked like the complete and utter lack of collision detection in some of the attacks, or at least ones that made sense, which sent apparitions, enemies, and antagonists falling backwards or sideways, sometimes completely separate from what I had done. But you know what? It's not all bad here. There's a lot that I actually liked. For example, the hub-based world interested me a great deal, and while it eschews realistic design like many titles, plopping down random eatables, drinkables, and pocketables all around the game world, it ends up opening up the game's space to create unique experiences that just weren't available in the original title, like later on in the game when new enemies are introduced into spots you've been or maybe haven't been, making quick forays into side quest areas, a different experience than they would have been originally, and I really dug that. While texture work, even on the PC, isn't going to win any awards at all for detail, and neither will geometry and complexity, I have to admit I dig the way the world's set up, and it's more of a use what's available to you kind of a design than the original title, and it really did work. But in the end, despite a couple absolutely incredible looking bosses and some excellent enjoyable fiends to electrify, burn, bash, smash, slash, or shoot, Evil Within 2 just doesn't really look that great. The effects for some things, like the later stages flamethrowers, are incredible, but overall, it's not a huge increase in fidelity or appearance, resulting in odd moments where you may think back and go, did Evil Within 1 look better than this? And in some places, it actually may have, but it also wasn't an open world title like this, nor did it allow for this kind of gameplay. It's a trade-off for sure. I'm just not 100% sure that Evil Within fans are going to want it. Now, when it comes to performance on the PC, it ran well on the i7 with the NVIDIA 1080 at 1440p, which was usually around 60 FPS with the settings on high and the recent drivers. While on the consoles, you have a 30 FPS target and what looks to be roughly the same performance as the original. Now, we all know that id Tech hasn't really had the best of times on the consoles, and the lack of any huge impressive increases really isn't that surprising. But strangely enough, most of the versions suffer from some fairly insane pop-in of the world geometry, which was surprising, and setting the LOD setting in the PC actually did not change this. It's just a sign of the engine probably being asked to do a little something that it wasn't prepared for. Altogether, I'd say this: the open world and the locations are incredibly interesting and varied. They're also fairly small and without any huge increases in graphics fidelity to the last title, except for an effect here or there. It looks pretty good, but it's not going to wow anyone. Sound, music, and voice.
I'm so close. I can feel it. Stay down. Wallace get mixed up in this.
It was Theodore's idea of sending the signal through STEM. Damn it. I knew he was. That's his. He convinced.
Yeah, until they... All right. Let's hope the marrow is still there.
And of course, we're going to do music first. This is an incredibly muted affair, so be prepared. And the game has no problem settling down for long moments without any musical notes being played, but always a vibrating through the speaker's low kind of thrum. They use that vibrational sound incredibly well, and despite it not really being music per se, it's also always there, and that continued presence allows for separate musical pieces to hit and still feel connected in some way, using that as sort of a floor. It's well done stuff, but it's not as musical in-game as some might expect, though, of course, neither was the first. Voice. You know, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but I don't think 1980s Clint Eastwood would be too keen on this. And it's true, many times I was like, is Sebastian trying to channel Clint, or do people who all want to sound a gruff, into their rope kind of character just sound like him magically anyway? Everyone else, though, is passable and fits about where you would expect, with a couple returning folks from the original game. For me, though, it's like everyone sort of sounded a bit off, like they didn't know exactly what they were going to use the sound samples for, so they looked at the voice actor and said, sound as bored as you can without sounding bored, and the voice actor probably gave them the same look you're giving me. It is a very odd voice choice. Overall, it worked, but I wouldn't say it's great. Sound. I always love it when a game firmly embraces environmental sounds, and while not exactly realistic, the work in Evil Within 2 elevates the mundane to this strange, mysterious, and at times sort of monstrous sound palette. For example, even the gurgling and popping bubbles of some strange creature's unknown body fluids are just a bit louder than you would actually expect, or the groan of an air duct far past its ears as Sebastian quickly scoots out of it, making you think it's just going to collapse. Weapon sounds are also well done, with the incredibly harsh report of the 45 or the popish sound of your sawed-off rattling around you, and affected by various post-processing effects like echo and reverb. If anything I wasn't happy with, it's the sniper rifle that sounds like a sniper rifle sounds, but doesn't carry any actual sonic impact through the speakers. It's like the sample just sort of plays, and you're like, yep, that sounds like a sniper rifle, versus maybe the other handguns that I admit at instances really sort of shock you with their sharp reports. Also, I have to give kudos to the channel separation and handling of multi-directional effects, because they're outstanding. I can't count the number of times I heard the far-off rattle of some demonic chick made of various Battlefield leftovers beginning to giggle to my left even before the controller started to vibrate with her footsteps, or the rustle of bushes when the many-faced scary things, which, yes, is actually now my official name for them, were getting ready to leap out of the tall grass and surprise attacks. It's just done incredibly well, and really, it has to be, especially in a game world like this where many times the eyes aren't what they used to be when it comes to sensing danger. And of course, that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. Now, Evil Within 2 starts out with Sebastian from the original game down on his luck, testing out just how far a liver can be pushed before it just says, yep, I'm out, and just leaves during the next bowel movement. No one believes the events of the past that he talks about, and in the end, 3 years have passed until someone from the original game comes forward and informs Sebastian that his daughter's still alive and taken by an evil, shadowy organization known as Mobius as their central CPU for a twisted version of the Matrix. And of course, what does a man do with an alcohol-to-blood ratio scary enough that the testing devices probably use them as calibration? Well, he grabs a bunch of guns and leaps into the action. From that point on, Evil Within 2 basically plays out in a hub-based open-world third-person game, with home bases offering sanctuary like delicious coffee and additional quests, and the main game world adding story elements, larger missions, and things called resonances, which are basically this game's versions of audio logs and important information that sort of furthers out the story. And I have to say, I actually liked a good deal here. First, I absolutely enjoyed the flexibility of engaging the game world on my own terms in its own open world style. It allowed for me to explore if I wanted, and rewarded that with a high number of hidden elements I could collect that explained more of the story as well. Because, let's be honest, the original was like someone handing you a friggin' tricycle and telling you to build a particle reactor with it and expecting you to understand how it all worked. The story was all over the place, and if I took anything away from Evil Within 2, it's that the story and making it clear to the players was paramount to the developers. And I have to say, for a lot of that, it's done in the side quests. Now, don't get me wrong, main quests move you through the 17 game chapters, but the side quests were given in this cool, organic way. Rarely did someone sit in a hostile area and say, hey, go get me 10 cucumbers so I can make this delicious salad. Here, you have to make sure they're safe. You have to take them to safe houses or break into theirs, and from that point on, some of them will have various side missions that all offer unique rewards like special weapons or even more story elements, but you never actually felt like you were missing something, regardless if you did it or not. And make no mistake, you can play through Evil Within 2 without doing any of those side missions, but to me, that'd really be a detriment, because some of the side missions and how they play out and later evolve is done really well once you take it all in at the end of the story. Also, it's nice to see a couple be based in a way that if you took further action and ignored them, they might not be able to go back and be done, but instead of some damned warning where it's like, the way back is blocked, there are some story elements that pretty much close those doors, and then pour cement on it, and then encase it in JB Weld. And I dig the fact that that wasn't done all the time because there was a risk there. Was that side quest going to shut down, or was it going to continue to stay open and allow me to do it? Because to me, there has to be a sense of risk, right? Either in getting more story or engaging in more action. And here, action has a tendency to get you, and sometimes the game, in trouble. First up has to be control, because most of the time Sebastian's probably best left sneaking. At times, though, you're going to have to go face to face with the enemy, and that's where the game goes from being in the mouth of madness to basically being the Lord of Illusions, because my lord, Sebastian doesn't control very well. I mean, he runs like he has a 10-pound sausage crap on deck and is looking for a download spot, and when he does get close to an enemy, up-close attacks with a knife, or if you beat the game, some brass knuckles, just sort of slide through the enemy, resulting in really odd moments where both you and the enemy have swung, and because Sebastian turns around like a damn double-decker bus, you and this fiend with glowing red eyes seem intent on performing the world's slowest karate kata. This can be fixed somewhat if you're using the mouse and keyboard, but really, to be honest, Sebastian always feels a little bit slower than he really should be. Now, when it comes to guns, those are much better, and that's because basically the game gives you a number of them and ways to use them that interact with the world, like turning on a fire hydrant, then shooting it with your electric bolt to shock the enemies in the side, and it works really well in the game as a sort of flexible open world moment. You can round up a large number of enemies and then loop back around, keeping them in a conga line of death behind you. And then the moment they enter the water, you shock them and take them out at your leisure. And whether you ghost through a lot of the levels or you take on the ghosts, the demons, and the faceless entities, and the entities with more than one face, you're going to end up collecting green gel, which can be used to level up Sebastian when he jumps into his own brain base, which is basically inside Sebastian's head and is accessed through specific mirrors, mostly in the safe houses. And some of them are actually very cool, like automatic dodging, automatic Sons of Anarchy bottle against the head defenses when a ghost gets too close, because as we all know, Casper and friends are susceptible to the same concussion syndrome sports players are. And there, as well as any place you find a crafting table, you can also upgrade things like the weapons and their clip size. Speaking of crafting, in a unique choice, you can actually craft while on the go, and that sort of turns a sphincter-tightening battle of the ages with an entity that lights itself on fire to hurt you into this pop-and-stop battle moment. Some things just don't make sense here. Much of it doesn't, in fact. The story's told far better than the original, and the open-world gameplay allows for some exploration, which is actually really interesting. But the smallest locations, coupled with the disconnect of the close-up battles, makes Evil Within 2 feel clumsy from the get-go. And when you add to that the fact that overall, things within the game world still just aren't really explained, you're left at times playing a jigsaw puzzle while you're standing on it, and if you mess up, a ghost eats your face. Why's the ghost there? No one really knows. Don't ask silly questions. And I would say one of the major places that the game shows its weaknesses is the bosses. Listen, the ectoplasm of the digital universe gathers together magically the cosmic slop of creatures to create some of these bad guys, who are then taken down by the equivalent of someone throwing metal pieces at them really, really fast. I mean, if it's so smart, you would have given the chick made out of human bodies some bulletproof vests. It's the equivalent of Harry Potter showing up and saying, guys, have you just tried stabbing the bad guy with a normal knife? Screw all the Horcrux stuff. Also, I see what they were trying to do in one section with some of the bosses, but it feels completely tacked on. When it comes to game length, the story lasts about 12 to 14 hours depending on difficulty, and usually you could add 4 to 8 more if you're going to do the side missions, again, depending on the difficulty and if you wanted 100% this kind of game. Fun factor. You know, when you're creeping through the game world and the shaking step of the giggly girl golems begin and you're trying to find someplace, any place to hide, just for a second, it can actually be an incredible series of moments. And again, I liked many of the side quests and the little story breaks that they offered. There's a good deal to explore and learn about the entire world. And the number of secrets and little places to actually go felt almost perfect. Also, I gotta say, I enjoyed the actual ending, and that's rare for me. But the issue is, the moment you get close to the creatures, which is indeed some of the crux of the scary parts, and the parts of the game that they drive home as mattering, it sort of falls apart. The combat is just loose, and I can't lie, shooting a ghost's head off is hilarious, but I'm not actually sure it should be. It should be tense or scary. But with me pulling out my craft table from my magical bag of holding so I can make an electric bolt because I didn't actually stress or care if I had made it prior because I knew I could do that in battle, that's not actually the best reflection of a tense moment at all. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with rent being replaced by deep, deep sale for PC. This is actually a wait for a sale, and to be honest, it is very close to a wait for a deep, deep sale. Here's why it's not, though. I actually enjoyed a great deal of what was going on with the enemy within, too. It just felt like sometimes it was from 2 or 3 different games all mashed together. That didn't necessarily stop that fun from happening, but it really does, as you're playing it, remind you of just how cool it possibly could have been. So that's it for me. I hope you liked the video. If you did, maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. Patreon is how I continue to give you guys reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Give it a thumbs down. If you dislike the video, my next reviews will be Elix on Monday, as well as South Park Fractured But Whole. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.